Hello, students. So, today we are going to do Patrick White's novel, The Solid Mandala. Now, before knowing the novel, let's know something about the author, Patrick White. So, Patrick White was an Australian novelist and playwright, and he was the first Australian to won the Nobel Prize for Literature in Australia. He received it in 1973. Also, he was the first Australian to receive the Miles Franklin Award as well. And to his credit, he had 12 novels, 3 collection of short stories, and 8 plays. And he was known for his deep and complex characters and focuses upon themes like human relationships, spirituality, and identity. Now, The Solid Mandala was published in 1966 and it was the seventh published novel. Okay. And in his autobiography, he has mentioned it that it is one of his best novels. Okay. Now, in this novel, White draws significantly on Carl Jung's theories, particularly those related to the collective unconsciousness and the concept of mandala as a symbol of wholeness and unity. White has also explored human psyche, duality, and the search for balance in this novel. In fact, the title encapsulates the novel's exploration of duality, balance, and the human condition. And as per Carl Jung's psychological theory, a mandala represents the search for completeness and harmony. It symbolizes the integration of opposites, which is reason and emotion. Now, reason and emotion they can't go together, but then mandala is it is symbolic of this kind of integration of the opposites, where you integrate reason and emotion, because when you become very reasonable तो फिर emotions आना थोड़ा दिक्कत देता है, right? But then, as the name suggests, the solid mandala, in this novel as well, you are going to find integration of the extreme opposites, reason and emotion, intellect and intuition, individuality and universality, right? So this is what you're going to find in the novel as well. Okay, जहाँ पे दो एक्सट्रीम एंड्स को इंटीग्रेट करके जोड़ करके हम लाइफ को देख सकते हैं. सो द सॉलिड मंडला इज ऑल अबाउट फाइंडिंग बैलेंस इन लाइफ. Okay, now let's know the characters of the novels of this novel. Sorry. So here we have a fraternal twin. One is Waldo Brown and the other is Arthur Brown. So they both are twins. Then we have Dulcie Feinstein, who is beloved by both the twins. Okay, and like she is desired by both the characters. Okay, then we have Mrs. Poulter, who is a friend to both the twins, but then she has an inclination towards Arthur more. ओके, अर्थर की तरफ ज़्यादा इनकी दोस्ती अर्थर से ज़्यादा थी. Then we have Mrs. Dunn, who is an acquaintance, a sort of relative. Then we have the Mustos, Mr. and Mrs. Musto, who are neighbors. Then we have Wally, who is a colleague at the library to Waldo. Now, coming to the structure of the novel is structured into 4 chapters, and each chapter is narrated in third person omniscient voice. Okay, now chapter 1 is a sort of introduction where you are going to find Mrs. Poulter and Mrs. Dunn talking at a bus stop, and they are watching the Brown brothers, the twin Brown brothers, coming together hand in hand, and they are old now. Okay, the Brown brothers are old, and with this the story starts. Okay, and these Brown brothers are not liked by their neighbors, their society, in which they live. Why? Because they are not like them, they are not like others, they are different. Why? How they are different? Because these two brothers never go to church, and this is what sets them apart from the community in which they live. Okay, सब कोई जाता है चर्च में, बट देन दीज टू ब्रदर्स दे डू नॉट गो टू चर्च ऑन संडेज. ओके, जिसकी वजह से इनको दूसरे वे में देखा जाता है. ओके, दूसरे वे में इन द सेंस दैट दे आर being condemned by their society, by the place, by the people of that particular place where they are living in. Okay, then so in this chapter as well, in chapter 1, we are going to find Mrs. Dunn having very like she's very opinionated about these two brothers. Okay, who are right now hand in hand, like वो दोनों हाथ पकड़ के नीचे उतर रहे हैं, बस स्टॉप की तरफ जा रहे हैं. And because they're old, they need uh, each other, right? And that is why they are joining, they are having hand in hand. Okay. और भी अगर आप देखोगे तो ये दोनों डेली का काम था इनका, ये लोग अपना ऐसे ही हाथ पकड़ के, बिकॉज दे बोथ ऑफ देम आर ओल्ड और ट्विंस ऑल्सो, तो दोनों ही साथ में बूढ़े हो गए थे. एंड दैट इज़ वाई दे ऑलवेज गो फॉर वॉक्स लाइक दिस. अपने डॉग को भी ये वॉक इसी तरह से कराया करते थे, डेली का काम था इनका कि जाकर के वॉक कराते थे, दोनों हाथ पकड़ के जाते थे और वॉक कराते थे. नाउ व्हाई आई एम फोकसिंग ऑन them having hand in hand, because this is something which is being condemned in their society. This is again one of the elements which is not liked by the people of the community they were residing in. Okay, then coming to chapter 2, it focuses on Waldo's perspective, and it is the largest chapter. Okay, here we are going to see the viewpoint of Waldo. Then coming to chapter 3, it is through it focuses on Arthur's perspective. So we are going to see Arthur's viewpoint on the same things, on the same events on which Waldo has already commented upon in chapter 2. So here we are going to find disparate outlook on life. जहाँ वॉल्डो का चीज़ों को लेकर के दूसरा आउटलुक, एक दूसरा पर्सपेक्टिव हुआ करता था, वहीं आर्थर का पर्सपेक्टिव उससे बिल्कुल ही डिफरेंट होगा. ओके, सो जो भी चीज़ें वॉल्डो ने बताई है चैप्टर 2 में, उन्हीं सब सेम चीज़ों पे, उन्हीं सब सेम इवेंट्स पे आर्थर का कैसे पर्सपेक्टिव बिल्कुल ही डिफरेंट था. This is what we are going to see in chapter 3. Then coming to chapter 4, it is from the perspective of Mrs. Poulter. Okay, यहाँ पे Mrs. Poulter अपना पर्सपेक्टिव बताती दोनों भाइयों के ऊपर. Okay. Then coming to the summary of the novel, it is set in the fictional suburbs of Sarsaparilla. Now Sarsaparilla is an imaginary place. Okay, ये कोई actual में कोई place नहीं है. It is imagined. It is an imagined fictional place constructed by पैट्रिक वाइट. एंड ये इनके एक और नावल में भी देखने को मिल जाता है. दो ही नावल में इन्होंने इस पर्टिकुलर इमेजिन्ड प्लेस को यूज़ किया था. आई एम फॉरगेटिंग द नेम ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर नावल, बट देन इट इज़ ऑफ नो यूज़ टू यू. So the most important thing is that it has, in this particular story, the solid mandala has been set in this particular suburbs of Sarsaparilla. Okay, now this is a story of twin brothers who are exact opposite of each others, but also quite complementing to each other. So they have very contrasting personalities. Okay, their personalities are exact contrast to each other, but then at the same time they complete each other. जैसे for example, one of them is an intellectual being. ठीक है, he can see beyond what our eyes can see. But then we have another brother who can't see deep meaning of life. He is an intellectual, well-read person, but then he can't see those deep uh, intricacies of life. But then the other brother who can see the deep intricacies of life. He is not an intellectual one. Intellectual, why I'm saying so? Because he is not well read. Okay, so this is how they complete each other. Okay, we are going to discuss कि कौन कौन है इसमें. Now, as the blurb says, so even in the blurb of the book, blurb you understand, जो book, जो cover book हम लोग जब भी कुछ खरीदते हैं, book खरीदते हैं, तो उसमें देखते हो last page जो होता है, not the last page, cover का जो back वाला cover होता है. एक तो front cover होता है where you get to see the title of the novel, the writer of the novel, then you have a beautiful picture also, right? Then we have the back cover, जो last cover होता है, cover page last होता है cover. So there whatever is written about the novel, so that a reader would be attracted to read that particular novel. Now that particular piece of passage is what you call blurb, blurb, blurb. Okay, so as the blurb says, two people living one life. So these two brothers, Waldo and Arthur, they are two people living one life. They shared everything. So they shared each and everything, all the events that has happened, they share it, except their view on things. So their perspectives are entirely different. Waldo, with his intelligence, saw everything and understood little. So, even though Waldo is the intelligent one, he is unable to see beyond the beyond what he can see. Okay, beyond whatever he can see in day to day life. But Arthur, on the other hand, who was the fool, he who did not bother to look, it is he who understood everything. So even though Arthur was a foolish man, he was able to understand each and everything. Now, next thing that is very important in this particular novel is that it has got no plot. Now you must be very amazed. I'm sure you must be stunned कि अरे plot कैसे नहीं है. But you need to understand the viewpoint of the writer. Now, the passage that you can find in this particular slide, the last passage, that is something which is being taken from Patrick White's book, uh, where he has commented upon this whole thing, that why he does not write plot, why he does not include plot in his stories. So let's see. Characters interest me more than situations. I don't think any of my books have what you call plots. I always think of my novels as being the lives of the characters. I have the same idea with all my books, an attempt to come close to the core of reality, the structure of reality, as opposed to the merely superficial. The realistic novel is remote from art. A novel should heighten life, should give one an illuminate in an illuminating experience. It shouldn't set out what you already know. So, as per the viewpoint of Patrick White, it is characters that interests him and not the situations. What is plot, by the way? Plot is something where you see how different situations are coming one by one, right? And how the characters of the noveling are tackling those situations. Now, Patrick White is of the view ki what I want to explore is the psyche of the characters. It is not the situations that is going to govern my novel. And that is why in his novels you can't find any plot. There is, even in this novel, The Solid Mandala, there is no plot. Of course there is, you can summarize it as a story, but then there is no plot. Okay, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होता है इसमें जो थोड़ा मतलब प्लॉट के वाली फीलिंग आपको दे. Okay, now coming to the characters. Now I am going to tell you the character sketches of both the brothers, and along with that I'm going to tell you the story as well. Now Waldo and Arthur are the Brown brothers, Brown twin brothers. The surname is Brown, of course. Okay, and Waldo is 2 or 3 minutes elder to Arthur. Okay, Waldo बड़ा है इसमें. होता है ना ट्विंस में एक थोड़ा 2-3 मिनट ज़्यादा बड़ा होता है. So Waldo is that particular elder of the twins, and he has worked in a library. He used to work in a library, and initially he was a writer as well. And in fact, he still believes that he's a writer, but then he failed as a writer. Okay. So he wanted to be a writer. He aspired to be a writer, but then he was just a failure. And if we consider Waldo's personality, he's a self-centered, egoistic kind of person. He's always jealous of his younger brother Arthur. And physically he is of like, he's weak man. He has certain deformity in his legs, because of which he's physically weak. And he is weak in the sense that he could not see deep meaning of lives. He couldn't understand what's going on around. He only sees what is happening and he considers that to be the end of it. So he is unable to see the deep intricacies of life, of any particular event of any life. Okay. And he is resentful of his half witted, incomprehensible brother. Now, his brother Arthur is not good at, you can say, he has certain issues with speaking. Okay. It is difficult for him to speak due to some or the other reason, and that is why he resents him. Okay. And he rejects, and coming back to Waldo rejects love and relationships as a sort of threat to his personal identity as a potential artist. So what the belief of Waldo is that if I'm going to have a sort of a relationship in the sense that if I'm going to befriend someone, if I'm going to fall in love, then maybe my personality will get influence. I am a very good artist, and if I'm going to go to other people, if I'm going to interact with other people, they are going to influence me, because this is how things work, right? हम लोग आए दिन किसी न किसी से मिलते हैं, and वो लोग अपने ideas को हमारे ऊपर like they impacts us, right? The ideas impacts us. And that is why Waldo is he feels that all these things are a sort of threat to him. Okay. It is threat to his personal identity. Uh, he wants to save his personal identity. He wants to cover his personal identity. He does not want to get influenced by anyone, and that is why he rejects love and relationships. Okay, why? Because he see it as a threat to his personal identity. He believes that I am going to be impure if I'm going to, my ideas are going to be impure if I'm going to interact with other people, if I'm going to have a relationship with other people. Okay. So his relationships breed frustration and a sense of inadequacy. It is quite difficult for him to communicate with other people. It is quite difficult for him to understand or be emotional towards other people. He lacks compassion. Okay. So he had a taste for the intellectual life and had literary aspirations as well. But at the same time, he is a very unemotional kind of person, right? He looks down upon each and everyone whom he comes across. ओके, उसको कोई नहीं पसंद आता, उसको ऐसा लगता है कि ज़्यादा लोगों से बात करूँगा तो मेरे आइडियाज़ इन्फ्लुएंस हो जाएंगे. एंड दैट इज़ वाई ही हैज़ कम टू दिस कंक्लूजन कि अकेले रहूँगा, एंड आई एम अ लर्नड पर्सन, सो आई शुड try to save my uniqueness. Okay, so he had a taste for intellectual life and had literary aspirations as well. And he has also attempted to write a novel also. The novel by the name of that particular novel was Tiresias, a Youngish Man. Okay, so he was writing a novel, but then it was just a fragmentary attempt. Why? Because he couldn't finish that novel, and that became the stigma of his anemic sterility. Anemic means एनेमिक इन द सेंस कि उसको समझ में आ गया कि उसका नहीं हो पा रहा है. उसको पता है कि ही इज़ गुड इनफ टू राइट नॉवल, बट देन ही रियलाइजेज दैट ही इज़ नॉट गुड एट एक्सप्रेसिंग the deep emotions of a human being. Okay, so Waldo's need, hatred, love, and jealousy of Arthur has distorted and twisted his perspective of the world. Like I told you in the beginning, that Waldo is always jealous of his brother Arthur. So it is his hatred and jealousy and the brotherly love for him also which has distorted his perspective of the world. And superficially he lives and acts out a life nourished by the belief that Arthur is an idiot and inferior being. So जब भी कुछ भी गलत होता है, he used to accuse, he used to blame Arthur for that. When they are not being when they are being condemned by their society, so he blames Arthur for this. Okay, so he believes that Arthur is just an idiot and an inferior being, and he has the same feeling for others as well. Okay, so he has hatred for Arthur. He hated Arthur for everything he is, for his ability to love people, for his capacity for experiencing, for his insight into the truth of things, for his appearance, and most of all, for the fact of his existence. So he was completely jealous of his brother. Why? Because Arthur has the ability to love people. Arthur has the capacity to experience things. Arthur has the capability to have an insight uh, into the truth of things, right? And most of all, he like just his existence is annoying Waldo. Okay, so all these things are the things for which Waldo hated him. And finally we get to see that he dies, and he had a very gruesome death. Why? Because after his death his body will start to rot, and his corpse is being mutilated by dogs. Dogs खींच के ले जा रहे थे उसके सड़े हुए corpse को. And this is how the Waldo story ends. Yes, so now coming to Arthur's story, he worked as a delivery man in a grocery store. Okay, and uh, he was presented as a sort of eccentric seer that sees into the heart of the matter. Okay, that means he is able to see the emotions, the deep psyche, the deep intricacies of all the events of all the people he comes across. And he shows a capacity to love जहाँ पे Waldo is incapable when it comes to love. Arthur is the exact opposite of Waldo, and he shows a capacity to love people, to have compassion towards people. Right? He's kind and gentle man. Now, he is the arena of simple, down to earth, practical abilities. For example, milking the cow, making bread, and enjoying his work as a delivery boy with the all rights. So, it is Mr. All Right who has employed him. So, it is being said that he is a simple, down to earth person, and he has got practical abilities. Practical abilities in the sense that he is able to milk the cow, he is able to make the bread, he is able to enjoy the work that he is doing, which is that of a delivery man, right? And he is good with animals and has a prodigious gift for sums, and that is why he has chosen the work of grocery, of being a delivery man in a grocery store. Okay, he has an openness and unaffected candor which enable him to Dulce Feinstein, Mrs. Poulter, and his mother. So, Dulce Feinstein, Mrs. Poulter, and his mother, all three women, were very much happy when it comes to Arthur, but they were not uh, like they did not like वॉल्डो दैट मच. अर्थर उन्हें ज़्यादा पसंद था, डल्चे फेंस्टीन को भी, मिसेस पाउल्टर को भी, और उसकी मदर को भी. एंड डल्से फेंस्टीन की अगर बात करें तो डल्से फेंस्टीन वॉज loved by Waldo also. I have told you initially when I was doing the character sketches, the characters of the story. I've told you Dulcie was loved by Waldo also. But then when Waldo was about to propose her, he gets to see her and Arthur together, in the sense that they were having a conversation, and he realizes कि अर्थर से उसको कितनी ज़्यादा चिढ़ मच रही है when he is talking to Dulcie. Okay, and that is how he doesn't get married to Dulcie Feinstein. And when we come to Dulcie Feinstein did like Arthur, but then she did not get married to Arthur. Rather, she get married to another man. Okay. Then coming to Mrs. Poulter also liked Arthur more, and even their mother, Arthur and Waldo's mother, she too liked Arthur more as in comparison to Waldo. Now, Arthur empathizes and emotes with others genuinely. So, he, like I told you, Arthur is a compassionate man, and that is why he is able to empathize and understand the emotions of others genuinely. Okay, but at the same time, he is not very articulate. He is not good at, you can say, he has some issues with his language, and that is why he's always confused and inarticulate. He nevertheless has a radiant goodness and insight that are represented by his four mandala like marbles. So it is Arthur who had the mandalas, the four mandalas. First one was a sky blue colored mandala. Okay. Second one was a mandala of gold color. Third one was a colorless mandala, and the last one had a spiral, twin spirals. Okay, so he is the one who was the keeper of the mandalas. Now, why he used to keep those mandala like marbles? The mandala was, by the way, designed by Mr. Musto. Yes, Mr. Musto, and Arthur used to keep those four mandalas with him. Okay, mandalas for him depicts the completeness, the balance of life. Okay, Arthur realizes that most of those around him cannot appreciate them or their meaning, and that is why it was himself who was and would remain the keeper of the mandalas, who must guess their final secret through touch and light. The struggle to guess their meaning is symbolized by the red gold disk of the sun, which he strives to hold, but also by the icebergs that moaned and jostled one another, crunching and tinkling to splinter into glass balls which he gathered in his protected hands, as said by Goodwin. Then Arthur's solid mandala is a symbol or image of his insight and need for an encompassing totality. So, mandala, as you can see, it is more about finding the balance in life. And Arthur, being the keeper of these mandalas, why did he keep those mandalas? Because he was able to understand the deep meaning that is uh, inherent in these mandalas, which is the quest for balance, right? Mandalas represent balance in life, balance of the two opposite extremes of life. And that is why Arthur was the keeper of those mandalas. Waldo क्यों नहीं रखता अपने पास mandala? These mandala was designed by Mr. Musto, and he designed it on marbles. Okay, so it is Arthur who is the keeper of these mandalas. Why? Because Waldo को तो उसको कोई भी इन डेप्थ चीज़ें तो समझ में आती ही नहीं. It is Arthur who was able to see the deep meanings, right? The intense uh, meanings of life. And that is why Arthur is the keeper of those four mandalas, and one by one he gives it to other people. For example, he gives the very first one, the blue mandala, to Dulce. Why? Because blue, like हम लोग नहीं कहते, whenever we say कि whenever we talk about God, we believe that He is residing somewhere up, right? Up. And what is up? It is the sky, the blue sky. And that is why Dulcie was the epitome of divinity for Arthur, and that is why he gives that blue mandala to Dulcie. Then the second one was the gold one. right? He gives that gold mandala to Mrs. Poulter. Why? Because she is no less than gold. Gold, what is gold, by the way? The epitome of grace, right? And that is why he gives that gold mandala to Mrs. Poulter. The third one, the colorless mandala, he wanted to give it to Waldo, but then Waldo did not accept it, and that is why it is Arthur, who is going to keep the mandala, the colorless mandala, with him. The last one was the mandala with spiral figures. Again, that was kept by Arthur because he believed that it is for him. Okay, now, so throughout the story, we are going to see that what was the name? Yes, Waldo and Arthur, they both are at a continuous disagreement. You are going to find their lives from teenage years to the old age times, and you are going to see how they are always mm, at a sort of war, you can say. दोनों एक दूसरे से कभी भी किसी भी चीज़ के ऊपर कोई भी अग्रीमेंट नहीं हुआ करता था, बट एट द सेम टाइम दे बीइंग ट्विंस दे यूज्ड टू शेयर ईच एंड एवरीथिंग। ओके, इन दोनों को साथ में एग्जिस्ट करते थे क्योंकि ये दोनों एक दूसरे को कॉम्प्लीमेंट करते थे। जहाँ पे वॉल्डो वीक पड़ जाता था, वहाँ पे अर्थर वही चीज़ उसकी स्ट्रेंथ हुआ करती थी, एंड जहाँ पे अर्थर वीक रहता था वहाँ पे वॉल्डो उसका स्ट्रेंथ बन जाता था। सो दैट इज़ वाई दीज टू कैरेक्टर्स वर कॉम्प्लीमेंटिंग ईच अदर इवन दो दे हैड वेरी डिस्परेट आउटलुक ऑन लाइफ, दे complemented each other. Like, Arthur was not physically weak, but Waldo was physically weak. Waldo was an intellectual, but Arthur was not an intellectual. He was not a well read man, and that is why he worked at a grocery store, right? और वॉल्डो लाइब्रेरियन था। वाई? लाइब्रेरी में काम किया करता, नॉट अ लाइब्रेरियन, ही यूज टू वर्क इन लाइब्रेरी। वाई? बिकॉज ही वॉज द इंटेलेक्चुअल वन। जहाँ वॉल्डो को सिर्फ और सिर्फ सामने से जो देख रहा है वही चीज़ समझ में आती थी, उसके अंदर की चीज़ें, अंदर की बातें नहीं समझ में आती थी। वहीं अर्थर, जो कि सामने की चीज़ें उस पर वो ध्यान भी नहीं देता था, एंड ही यूज टू अंडरस्टैंड द डीप इंट्रिकेसीज। he had an eye for those deep um, meanings. Okay, so this is how they used to complement each other. Even though they had very disparate outlook on life, they complemented each other. Okay, and throughout the story you're going to see this, the series of disagreements on one or the other thing, and finally when they grow old they used to go to go for walks hand in hand, and they used to take their dogs as well. And one day what happens is वॉल्डो की डेथ हो जाती है। वी डू नॉट नो हाउ ही डाइड, देर इज़ नो मेंशन ऑफ the reason of his death, but then eventually it is just an abrupt ending that Voldo dies and his rotten corpse is being mutilated by dogs. Okay, so that was a very, very gruesome death, I must say. So Arthur remains all alone in the end. Now, so this is the story of the novel. They both had a liking for that girl Dulcie Feinstein, but then Dulcie marries someone else. She did not get married either to Arthur or to Waldo. She marries someone else. Then, coming to, and these two brothers were disliked by the people of their community. Why? Because they were not conforming to the norms of that particular society they were living in. They never used to go to church, जहाँ पे बाकी सब कोई बहुत ही religious हुआ करते थे, वहाँ पे Waldo and Arthur were the were the men who were not at all religious. They never used to go to church on Sundays. Okay, and next thing is that they used to walk hand in hand, which is something which is being condemned by the society. Okay, this is a question on the masculinity, rather, and that is why this is again a reason for which they were being condemned. वॉल्डो को इसलिए भी नहीं पसंद किया जाता था बिकॉज ही वॉज अ वेरी कोल्ड हार्टेड पर्सन, बट अर्थर वॉज बीइंग liked by people. Why? Because of his friendly, amicable nature. Okay. Now, McLeod argues it is important to realize that neither Arthur or Waldo can exist as a whole individual without the other. So, like I told you, they complemented each other. जहाँ पे अर्थर वीक पड़ता था वहाँ पे वॉल्डो उस चीज़ में स्ट्रेंथन होता था, जहाँ वॉल्डो वीक होता था वहाँ अर्थर का स्ट्रेंथ होता था वो, right? So consequently there is a logical reason for Arthur ending up in a nut house at Waldo's death. Waldo should not be viewed merely as a character who exists as a contrast to the true seeker, Arthur. It is through the form and structure of Waldo's section, that is chapter 2, that we can understand Arthur's section, which is chapter 3 in the novel. Although structured separately, the two parts interact, and the interdependence of the two sections reflects the necessary interdependence of the two brothers. So, like I told you in the very beginning when we were discussing the structure of the novel, in chapter 2, you are going to find Waldo's perspective on the events on life. And in chapter 3, you are going to find Arthur's viewpoint on the same events on which Waldo has commented upon in his chapter, in his section. Okay, and that is how we are going to see कि कैसे ये दोनों एक दूसरे के बिल्कुल opposite थे, but at the same time they were the ones who complemented each other. Okay, so with this, the solid mandala is done. You are advised to go through the notes. मैंने भी वहीं से कई सारी चीज़ें, कई सारे points लिए हैं. For example, all the quotations that I have used, जहाँ कहीं कहीं पे तो quotation mark लगाया भी नहीं है, but then I have used it from those notes only. So I've already shared you the notes. उसको read करिए, go through those notes, and if you have any problem, if you have any trouble in understanding any of the topics, then you can always रीच आउट टू मी. एक पर्टिकुलर एक मैंने अलग से पोस्ट डाला हुआ है. यू हैव टू कमेंट इन दैट पर्टिकुलर पोस्ट ओनली. ओके, दैट्स इट फॉर टुडे. थैंक यू. आई विल ट्राई टू टेक अप अ पोम बाय नाइट. ठीक है, रात तक अगर हो सका तो मैं किसी पोम या फिर मे बी आई कैन टेक अप अ शॉर्ट स्टोरी एज वेल. लेट्स सी what time permits. So then we'll do that. Okay, thank you.